Like somebody said that Haralabob is like the Martin Shkreli of the NBA.
Martin, we got to click live in a second on that one. Welcome back to basketball on the Monster. You got me laughing. So sorry, I was just cutting live because it's now 9 o'clock on the East Coast. Welcome to the midweek mid-range, and thank you all for pulling up. Got a couple of. We're just joking about being with this. I guess this triumvirate was on the show once upon a time back in the early days. Kyle, Jamaal, how we doing?
Great to be here, and yes, it's me again.
Kyle, you doing okay?
Happy to be here. Happy to support.
All right. So I got to ask if y'all have watched. I know Jamaal was watching a little bit of. Talk to me. Have y'all watched the first half of Atlanta, Philadelphia?
What first half? It's a demolition derby right now, because I think Philadelphia is really saying like, well, we basically gave Game 4 away, so we're going to remind Atlanta who the heck we are.
Kyle, have you gotten to have it on at all, or are you just now sitting down to talk some ball?
I just turned the TV on and I just saw the score.
It looked like to me, Jamaal, it looked like the Joel Embiid, before he got hurt, he was the MVP kind of first half. Poor Clint Capella might have talked a little bit too big for his britches this time around. It was great what he did with New York. I love the Hawks talking noise. It reminds me now more of a couple years back. Again, he was one of my Rockets. And they finished with the first round series in 2019 and said, we want the Warriors. And the Warriors played him off the floor really fast. They were like, we're going to go small, and you can't play the Warriors. And so, anyway, I hope that it is Game 5. So, theoretically, even if they have a rough night tonight, maybe he has a better one. But I hope that one goes 7 and has a close one, because the close games in that with Trae Young and Joel both talking noise are fun. And then the night game is Utah-LA, and we're going to talk some about how that game changed a whole lot. But are y'all staying up late to watch that one tonight?
Oh, yeah. I'm going to stay up and watch that, because when the game starts, it's only going to be 8 o'clock up here.
Yeah, Mountain Time Zone. How about you, Kyle? You're on the East Coast. You staying up late to watch Utah-LA?
Yeah, I may or may not have taken a nap through the first half of Atlanta, Philadelphia, so I could watch that one.
All right, prioritizing the West Coast game. I like it. All right, we're going to jump into our first segment, talking about the West Coast game. I guess this team isn't quite West Coast, but our first segment is Hot Tea Cold Brew. Hot Tea Cold Brew is brought to you by Yeti Coolers, Cups, and Koozies. Yeti is the go-to shop for keeping things hot or cold, just like these NBA stories. Yeti's based out of Austin, Texas. Check out the links in our social media handles for all insulated needs for tailgating, camping, and daily life. Yeti is built for the wild. Also, I may know this from personal experience. Yeti makes a great Father's Day present. Father's Day is Sunday. Yeah, I need a mug. You need a big cup. Just like to drink. Just like to drink hot stuff, cold stuff. Yeti's a good thing. All right, our first hot tea cold brew question. I'll throw it to Kyle first. Kyle, hot tea cold brew. The Phoenix Suns are the best team left. What do you think?
Cold. And I think you got to look at the Jazz. Down Mike Conley through this whole second round series with the Clippers. I still think that they're the team to beat now that looks like Kawhi is going to be out for the remainder of the playoffs.
What about Jamaal? What do you think? Hot tea, cold brew. The Phoenix Suns are the best team left.
I say hot tea. I can't see anybody else who's been playing better than them right now. Because right now, if you date back to the Lakers series, the Suns have won 7 straight playoff games, and they've been. And it is not just like small, close at the horn wins that they're getting. They're beating teams by double digits for each of those 7 games. So right now, I know the Chris Paul situation with him being in protocols right now, that will sting, and who knows how long he's going to be out. But point to me who the best team has been through the first 2 rounds of the playoffs. It's been Phoenix.
Well, and I will say that, peek behind the curtain, with all the NBA news today, this lineup of what we're going to talk about changed a lot. Like when I first threw that down, Chris Paul was in the lineup, and then he was not. And so I wonder if that changed things. I think the intriguing thing, Kyle, I'll throw this part to you first, is talking about are they the best team left? Because the key word seems to be left. Like I'm looking at the Jazz without Mike Conley. That's who's left. The Nets with a very hobbled Harden and no Kyrie Irving. That may be who is left, right? Like I'm looking at those kinds of things. Obviously, we're watching Joel Embiid look pretty good for Philadelphia right now. But do you think that there's, assuming Chris Paul can get back after just a game or two, do you think that being relatively healthy is going to play a big factor? Or do you think Utah's that good?
I think that the championship's going to come down to whoever stays the healthiest. And, I think that Phoenix has gotten pretty lucky with their matchup so far because they've gone against hobbled teams. And other than Portland, I honestly think that Denver was perhaps the worst team in the Western Conference playoffs.
Ooh. Well,
just as they were presented
with no Jamal Murray,
yeah,
right.
And I mean that was kind of a cake matchup because it turns out that DeAndre Ayton's the real deal and can shut down Jokic.
He played well.
But how's he going to do against the team that's not quite as low post elbow oriented, and it's more of like a drive and kick motion spread pick and roll offense. Remains to be seen how he'll do with that. So I think that I'm still taking Utah here. And I think I forgot what the original question was because I want to expound on what I said before.
Just are the best team left, with left being focused on injuries, right? Because obviously the Chris Paul news today is big, hoping he gets back really quickly. You just think the Utah Jazz with Mike Conley out and a little bit banged up Donovan Mitchell are still too much, it sounds like.
Yes, I originally would have taken the Clippers, honestly, but
we'll get to them specifically later. But obviously they had a big blow today, right? Jamaal, you were kind of bullish on the idea that someone's better than Phoenix right now. I will say that one thing you could point out really quickly is that like there's not a whole lot more they could have done in the Denver series, a demanding or commanding sweep of the series. Like there's literally nothing better they could have done in that series, right? Mm-hmm. Like if they were 10 leaps and bounds better than Denver, it would have really yielded about the same result. So talk to me when you say, yes, Phoenix is the best team left. What are you seeing?
So what I'm seeing is a team that has basically been together for, I think, close to or just a little bit shorter than some of these other teams that you have, because Brooklyn, as we saw throughout the season, they're still mixing and matching how they're going to play with Harden, Kyrie, and KD all together. And then they only play 8-9 games in the regular season together. And then you have Milwaukee. That group, basically the core group, has been around for a while. And then you add in pieces like Jrue Holiday, and then of course PJ Tucker, who is a steal right now. Even though Milwaukee, I don't know what the hell they were doing yesterday. It just blows my mind. But right now it's really consistency right now for Phoenix. I think after Game 3 against LA, and really when the Lakers just took them to the woodshed, I think Phoenix finally figured out, okay, here's who we are. Here's what we need to do to be able to stay competitive. Yes, the injury to AD really helped their cause, but I think even with the healthy AD, it would have been hard for LA to really match up against what Phoenix was doing. And as we already saw in the Denver series, no Jamal Murray or whatever, but even with him, I think Phoenix would have been too much in the end.
Well, and so we'll talk the other half the Western Conference right now, but we're looking at the Utah-Phoenix matchup specifically, and I think we all know why we're going to lean to that for a second. Are we looking at that because, I see Utah as a team that once you're out of rotation on, they get 3 points, right? They have so many shooters. They've got a lot of depth. I got to imagine Conley does come back for the conference finals, assuming they make it that far. But they're really, really good, whether it's Bogey or Ingles or even Donovan to an extent, just catch and shoot in the rotation. You're out of rotation, it's kick. They find the open guy, boom, boom. You're just done. The thing that was interesting to me about the way that Phoenix beat Denver was that it wasn't so much about keeping up in rotation. as much as they did what I call the Popovich defense. I'll talk for that in a second if you want, but they just didn't double Jokic. They said, Jokic, you're going to get 30 points. That's cool. He also doesn't get 20 assists, right? Like the goal was just to keep him from being a creator. And I think that's interesting how these two teams are so different. Utah doesn't necessarily need any one guy to be the creator to score a bunch of points, right, Kyle?
I think so. And just kind of like evaluating the matchup and, what we haven't seen from these two teams yet and what we have seen. And with Utah, I think that it's not just Conley, but I think they got room to grow just as far as like Joe Ingles' role is concerned, because he's best suited to be like the backup point guard pretty much. And they've been using him as a starter. And I feel like that's partially the reason that like I feel like they've lost some steam with their second unit. Whereas during the regular season when they were fully healthy, because they're fully healthy for most of the regular season, that's when like the blender was really, really going. But I think just as far as Phoenix is concerned, they looked amazing against Denver, but I just remember, and I can't get this image out of my head, but when the Lakers went to Anthony Davis at center in the first round, that's when they took the 2-1 lead. And that's when, like LeBron was having fun, they're reflecting his back down, or Drummond was on the bench, and they're kind of being like clowned. And, I think it's what turned Phoenix around, just as kind of a wake up slap. But so was, for the Lakers, it was Anthony Davis going out with a groin injury, and that ended their season. So I just think just seeing Phoenix, and I was thinking that they were done as soon as the Lakers were going Davis at center. I'm still not all the way sold on them, in spite of their sweep against Denver.
And Jamaal, you are sold on them. To be fair, I see Rudy Gobert as too important to what Utah does for them to completely go small in the same way that Kyle is talking about LA effectively did when Davis was hurt, right? But to also be fair, Rudy Gobert is not Andre Drummond. And I don't mean that it's a slight to Drummond. Like, Rudy Gobert is a 3-time Defensive Player of the Year. He punctures the defense in a very different way when he rolls the basket than Drummond does. So, Jamaal, you are sold on Phoenix. What is their solution to what Utah does?
So really, it's just all about matchups. And so so if it happens to be Utah and Phoenix, I want to see how both teams defend the other superstar. So, for instance, what does Utah do to combat against Devin Booker? Do they start with Royce O'Neal on him, or do they want to put more size as far as either Ingles or Bogdanovich to start out with? I want to see how they do it that way. For Phoenix, I want to see how they combat against Donovan Mitchell. Do they start out with Mikal Bridges? Do they start with Jay Crowder to give him more size and power against him so it can take away that drive? So there's a lot of things to consider when for that matchup. But as far as for whatever teams that Phoenix might see, I mean, as they pulled it up the other day, as far as matchups are concerned, like Phoenix won all 3 games against Utah this year, and most of them were pretty convincing victories. Now, I will say those probably earlier on in the year or whatnot, but hey, win's a win. But then then Phoenix loses 2 out of 3 to the Clippers. But now that dynamic changes a little bit now because with Leonard being out. So it's going to be interesting to see. But I want to see, how does the other team guard the other team's best superstar? That's really the matchup I want to see right now.
Well, I will say that I imagine Rudy Gobert can't be in drop coverage against the mid-range game of Booker and Paul. Him playing level has been his weakness in the past. Anyway, I think it's a fun series. I want to jump into the next topic, hot tea, cold brew, because it's kind of why we're writing off the Clippers, and I feel like we're dancing around it, so let's just go ahead and talk about it. Jamaal, hot tea, cold brew. Chris Paul missing, at this point, we just know it's games of the Western Conference Finals. We don't know how many. Is more impactful on the Western Conference or the NBA as a whole than Kawhi Leonard missing indefinite amount of games. I'm looking, it looks like there was no report on if it was or was not an ACL tear. They're hoping it's just a sprained knee right now. So hot tea, cold brew to Jamaal. The Chris Paul missing games is more impactful than Kawhi Leonard missing games.
It's tough because you can make the case for both players, but I would have to go Cole T because even if Chris Paul goes down, you have Cameron Payne coming off the bench who's done a really good job throughout these playoffs, as we saw throughout most of the Lakers series and really in spurts against Denver. So for the most part, Phoenix, I think can live with that for at the very minimum, maybe 2 games. I don't know about a third one, but Kawhi Leonard going down, that's basically a good 30 to 35% of LA's offense right now. And that's going to put more pressure on playoff P, Paul George, to come through. And as we know, he's had a very not so pleasant playoff record or resume for that matter. So I'm interested in seeing how he's going to come out in Game 5 because all eyes are going to be on him from here on out with Leonard being out.
Fair enough. All eyes on playoff / pandemic / whatever P you want to call him. Kyle, I think I know your answer to this question based on something you said a second ago, but I got to ask it. Hot tea, cold brew. Chris Paul missing the Western Conference Finals games is more impactful than Kawhi missing an extended period of time. You're muted, buddy.
So just don't like to, be clearing my throat and have it just dominate the audio. But what I was saying was, for me, it's cold because I look at the second best players on each, and I have a lot more faith. It might seem strange in Devin Booker than Paul George, and part of that is you're looking at perhaps most overrated star in the league versus the most underrated, and it is sort of like the travesty within just the marveling of Chris Paul's greatness this year, and that was that it sort of like left Booker out to dry.
Yeah,
and deserves more credit than he's received. And it's the situation where it's like with 2 stars on a team, they sort of like steal each other's votes. And it didn't really happen in this situation. Paul finished 5th in MVP, but just also like I think the presence on the bench matters as well.
Yes,
because I don't think you're going to see Kawhi, leading a huddle, like grabbing a clipboard. Far less likely. Like I said, like with the 2 underrated, overrated, you have the most likely to do that, and probably the least likely of any player in the NBA. So I think Paul's intangibles are probably equally as valuable as his on-court production. Perhaps, but I think that's why Kawhi is going to be more sorely missed than Chris Paul will.
I think that's all fair. I think the interesting thing here is that like Kawhi Leonard's legacy story, whatever you want to buy into and all that, is entirely based on the big finals moments, right? It's entirely based on the 17 bounce shot against Philadelphia that gets them to the Eastern Conference Finals. It's based on his finals performance as a Raptor. It's based on being the guy that makes LeBron do a double take over his shoulder at the free throw line back in Miami, right, when they played the Spurs. It's based on those kind of things, whereas Chris Paul's is the opposite. Chris Paul's is based on greatness up until Western Conference Finals Game 5's Houston Rocket. It's based on the series game winner against the Spurs on a bad hammy in Game 7. It's based on those moments, but none of those are in the finals the same way that Kawhi's moments seem to only be the finals, with the exception of a couple of also important playoff games along the way. Jamaal, you point out that it seemed like you were more back and forth on this. I think Kyle brings up a good point that if I'm going to the second best player or the best cast of characters around either one of these guys, the Phoenix Suns sure look a lot better without Chris Paul than I think the Clippers do without Kawhi. Is there some Clipper you see stepping up to fill that role, not named Pandemic P?
Well, for the Clippers, I think you maybe have to look at a couple people. So I look at Luke Kennard, but I also look at a guy who's really played well in Reggie Jackson. Those guys are really trying to help steady the ship in all the games. When they lost the first 2 against Dallas, we saw Reggie Jackson come out with a flurry up in most of those games in Dallas, and he really set the tone. So I don't know if he's going to be enough to help carry the load while Leonard's out, but right now the Clippers really don't have any options. That's why I say that come this time of year, one of the most important things other than health is depth. And if you don't have the depth, it's going to show up on the scoreboard real quick.
Kyle, do you see any Clipper or combination of Clippers aside from playoff P, filling the void for Kawhi Leonard in the same way, or is that really just not going to happen? And that's what we're talking about the Jazz so much.
I'm very, 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 very much doubtful that anyone's going to step it up, because it's more of like a collection that's greater than the sum of its parts. And you see spacing at every position. You see Batum excelling as a small ball 5, but at the same time, with Phoenix, you're going to see Bridges, you're going to see Ayton, and I have more faith in those two guys than I do in the rest of the Clippers supporting cast. And you're seeing that with just some of the lineup that Ty Lue's taking, where he does his best to avoid putting Kennard on the floor at the same time as Donovan Mitchell, because they just headhunt him, and they're really mean, just seeking him out in those open court type of attacks from Mitchell. And I think when you look at the Jazz, you have Ingles and Bogdanovich, and I think I trust Clarkson more than I do Jackson and some of the other instantaneous offensive weapons. And I don't like what I've liked what I've seen from the Clippers this year, but just as far as somebody stepping up, I think they've been in their right positions to be successful. And losing Kawhi, I think they're not really cut out to take it up a notch. And I think that goes 1 through 8, really.
One off-book question, and off-book, I mean, as in I'm just asking this and I didn't write it down, but I think you both seem to have some sort of ideas about it. The team that benefits from all of this is Utah, right? Utah gets to now have the Kawhi-less Clippers without knowing exactly the parameters of how long Chris Paul is out. They get to see the Suns without Chris Paul. I know they don't have Mike Conley, and I know Donovan Mitchell is not fully healthy. Is this a lucky break, or are the Utah Jazz the kind of team that would have probably been able to get to this point anyway? What do you think about? Does this affect what we think of the Utah Jazz at all? I'll start with Jamaal.
Well, I think it's all going to depend on what happens tonight. If Utah wins tonight and then finish the job of the next game in LA, then I say, yeah, they should be very confident or whatnot. But it's all going to depend on tonight and how they come out, because game 4, they came out really flat. And you saw throughout the game where the Clippers basically just took their manhood away. So it's going to be important for Utah, mostly their role players. We know what Donovan's going to do. I know for the most part what Bogey's going to do. I want to see how Clarkson and Ingles and Gobert, how all those guys are going to fare better at home, because we all know the whole story. Role players play better when they're at home.
Well, and that's actually something I thought is interesting is in reflection. All the news came out this morning. So in reflection since this morning, I was like, well, Chris Paul only misses 2 games. Both of those games were in Utah anyways.
Yes.
Obviously, Phoenix would love to split, but if they just if it's just 2-0 going back to Phoenix and Chris Paul comes back, is a rested up Chris Paul necessarily the worst thing, Kyle, or is this really going to be a big swing in Utah's favor?
I don't think it's the worst thing, but he seems fine after the shoulder injury against the Lakers. And, I think that just as far as just the paths the championship teams take is they say every championship team has always been lucky, and where that's not avoiding the injury bug or catching the right matchups. On the flip side, I think that there's also just sort of a blessing of the challenge. And I think you sort of look at the Hawks and the Philadelphia series, and the Hawks are pushed a little more just as far as making adjustments in order to beat the Knicks and kind of turning that corner to take the series in 5, versus Philadelphia, which they're playing t-ball against the Wizards. And I think that you look at maybe too much rest isn't always the best thing, and Utah being kind of pushed to their limits through, I think, probably one of the best coaches in the NBA, just as a tactician, Ty Lue. And we've seen like the past 6 quarters, once they started like, like denying sort of like the first option in their sets, that they've really struggled to score more so than I think we've probably seen all season. So I think that with tonight's game, I'm interested to see how they sort of adapt to that adjustment by Lou and how they adapt themselves. And, it's tough that just that whole like rest versus just the warm up, I guess.
Yeah.
And, like they're not, they're still playing, and, this series will probably go 6, it might go 7. And, they're going to be mentally attuned to handling whatever the Suns throw at them.
That's fair. And again, this is not necessarily a big Jazz question. It's just interesting that they are weirdly involved in both of these stories, because if the Kawhi Leonard injury is so big, they benefit big time. And the Chris Paul injury is so big, or the Chris Paul absence is so big, they also benefit big time. And frankly, we've seen players as far back as Russell Westbrook in the bubble, or as recently as you've got guys like Tybal and Jimmy Butler talking about how much weight they lost when they had COVID. If it's the case that he has COVID, right, that could be longer lasting than just these playoffs. We don't know enough about that yet. I know that Jalen Rose on TV today, I think the latest there was Jalen Rose had confirmation in his own words that Chris Paul had the vaccine. So I guess hopefully even if he has COVID, that's supposed to diminish the symptoms a lot and the impact a lot. So I guess we'll know a lot more in the coming days. It's weird that all that hit this morning. All that news hits this morning. Thus Parker rambles on the podcast. The biggest story of today should not have been this morning. The biggest story of today should have been the most incredible basketball I've seen in a long time last night out of Kevin Durant. And so my question, and I'll start with you, Kyle, is hot tea, cold brew. The Kevin Durant game last night was the best individual performance in the last 10 years. I know that's feels like a long time and maybe hyperbolic, but man, it sure felt like that watching it. So, Kyle, what do you think? Hot tea, cold brew?
I'd probably have to go hot on that one. And I think just the only 2 performances that came to mind that could probably upseat Durant last night, Klay Thompson, Game 6, 2016 Western Conference Finals, goes off for 11 threes, and just the flow of the game was much like the Bucks and the Nets game last night.
Yeah,
where it's like it seems like they're like that game. It seemed like the Thunder were always up like 9 to 5 points, and last night it was like they're always up like 11 to 15 until the Nets turn that proverbial corner. And then the other one, of course, is I think it was 2012 Game 6 Eastern Conference Finals. LeBron 45 and 15. And I think he shot like 75% or something from the field.
It was they in both cases. So first of all, both cases were must wins or else you're eliminated. Klay Thompson's was on the road. LeBron's was in the Garden. And then I want to say the other thing that I would throw in on the LeBron James win is they had lost in the finals the year before. And so if they were to get eliminated by the Celtics, all of a sudden the Heatles looked like a flop, right?
The media would have killed them.
He didn't have the triple-double, which I think is an important part of the way that this ownership happened to the game. I just want to make sure I had context for what you were talking about, Kyle, but you finish.
Oh, just I think sort of back up against the ropes in those 3 instances, just a total legacy game. And, I think we'll probably see that the image last night of Durant after he hits the 3 against it was like off the Harden kick out, end of the shot clock.
Yeah.
Where he just kind of like looks up at the sky and just like, just thanks the man upstairs. Had no idea how that one went in. It was sort of like a Jordan shrug. Like, hey guys, I didn't even think I was going to make that one. I didn't know I had it like that. But yeah, I was just, it's just another reason why you shouldn't turn off a game just because a team's down 20 in the third.
Oh yeah,
completely.
So I stuck with it the whole way. I'm so happy I did.
Well, I stuck with it because it was the only game of the night, and so I was like, "What else am I doing?" Jamaal, Talk to me, hot tea, cold brew. The Kevin Durant game last night was the best individual performance in 10 years. Kyle named a couple that are in the same realm. Do you think of any better, or is this the best the last 10 years?
Oh, man, because consider all the circumstances going into this game. Kyrie's out. That was a big blow. We didn't know how effective Harden was going to be. And Milwaukee's basically licking their chops saying, like, hey, like, we won the last 2 in Milwaukee. We got momentum. Let's go for the kill right now. And Charles Barkley said it. This is a game in Milwaukee I personally believe they had to win, because you win and go home for game 6, you have a chance to close it out. Now you're facing elimination. So the way Durant played throughout, and the most amazing thing about it is he played the entire game for all 48 minutes. And to put up the stats that he did, but also a bit, and I do agree it's hot tea for his performance, but Klay Thompson is right behind him for what he did for Golden State in 2016. But I just have to say, with all the hoopla with Durant, rightfully so, big shout out to Jeff Green, because I think without his performance, I don't think they're even in the game to begin with.
Well, to be fair,
but why did he go off? And
right,
it's because equally as a legacy game for Bud. Now he coaches with his head up his ass.
Very, very different legacy game for Coach Bud, but a legacy game nonetheless. Poor Milwaukee. That guy's Coach Bud's already got his ZipRecruiter profile set up, right? Like, he's already looking for the next gig. So other things I want to point out about Kevin Durant is played 48 straight minutes, did not come out of the game. The last time that happened in a playoff game was the LeBron James 50-point night, game 1 of the 2018 finals against the Warriors. He infamously may or may not have punched a whiteboard after that game because of the J.R. Smith thing, and then broken his hand or whatever. There was that whole rumor about that right after, because he had his hand taped up in the press conference, and very LeBron thing. But that game itself was tremendous. Kevin Durant playing 48 minutes and scoring 49 points is I'm not a big mathematician, but that's more than a point per minute. And B, everyone, he should realistically also be on a minutes restriction still. Like, he had the Achilles injury. This was not that long ago that he couldn't walk. And so, if he had said, I can only play 40 tonight, sorry, coach, that probably would have been doctor's orders, right? That's not really so playing 48 minutes was tremendous. Also, James Harden did play almost 46 minutes, but was not James Harden. He was when you play backyard football and one dude takes all-time quarterback and you don't rush the pass, it's just 2-on-2, but there's one dude that's playing all-time quarterback. All-time quarterback was James Harden. He was not doing a whole lot else. He was just passing the ball. He went 1 for 10 from the field.
I got a good one for you. It's like how I imagine Mark Jackson plays pickup these days.
It's entirely James Harden played exactly how
50-year-old Mark Jackson.
Completely. I would point out that LeBron James game in 2018 I thought sticks out. You brought up Game 6 in 2012. I go back to 2011 because with no other stars on his team, Dirk Nowitzki had finals games that felt similar. I don't know that it was quite as dominant at any single point, because, frankly, I don't know how you guard Durant. And the Nowitzki thing to me was there was always a physical element. You could get physical with him, and maybe that's me being a Rockets guy, but I thought you could get physical with him in a way that didn't seem to bother Durant last night. It probably did in Game 4.
It did.
I thought, the thing that if you're going to try and say it's not the most impressive the last 10 years, not that it's not impressive, but not the most impressive the last 10 years, is exactly what Jamaal said about Jeff Green. If Jeff Green doesn't go 7 for 8 from 3 and 6 for 6 from 3 in the first half, this game is unreachable in the second half. Even it probably shouldn't have been anyway, and we'll talk about Bud in a second. But it probably wouldn't have been had Jeff Green and Blake Griffin not played so well in the first half, in a way that the Klay Thompson Game 6 feels like he did that the whole game, right? I don't know. I watched that last night though, and by the end, my wife had gone upstairs. She was watching Outlander or something, and I was like, I'm watching the rest of this thing. I'm not turning this off. This is phenomenal. This is fun. It was truly incredible to see a guy in his element, and something special was happening. Come on, looking at this guy, like something special was happening on the basketball court last night. The inverse of what special was happening last night is the Bucks blew another big lead, and I'll be honest, on my other show, F in Sports, and we're doing a playoff preview, I thought the Bucks had a shot to win it all because this year felt like I saw them experiment and do more things in the regular season than I'd ever seen Coach Bud do before. And I felt like that was a good indicator for like some sort of a growth. Like we're going to try something definitively new. And I think I got proven wrong last night. Hot tea, cold brew, this question is that Giannis Antetokounmpo needs to shoulder the responsibility for the blowout or the blown lead, I should say, on Tuesday night. You hear that, Jamaal, and you think what?
Yes, it is hot tea. He does need to take responsibility for that. And what's killing me is that like earlier in that segment or whatever, Giannis was on the defensive first team, I think it was. So it would behoove you to guard probably one of the best top 10, top 5 scorers in the NBA. It drove me crazy. Like, don't get me wrong, PJ Tucker is one of the best defenders in the game. But at the same time, like Giannis has more length, is more athletic, and he can bother Durant's shot a little bit more than Tucker can because Tucker is more the physical defender. But it just absolutely blew my mind how Milwaukee throughout most of the second half of that game where they just took it off the gas pedal and they did not go to their advantages. They can beat up Brooklyn in the post. They can beat them on the boards. And for whatever reason, they did not do that. I see Giannis taking more jump shots and threes. Like, I'm like, what the hell are you doing? Like, you're losing your advantage. So, and this takes nothing away from Brooklyn's win, but I'm looking at Milwaukee like you literally threw that game away. And Charles Barkley was right after the game. Milwaukee deserved to lose that game.
Well, I certainly think Milwaukee deserved to lose. I'm interested to hear, and you seem to blame or put a load of the blame on Giannis. He is the superstar. That's, heavy is the crown that bears the sword, right? Like that is part of the deal there. Kyle, hot tea, cold brew. Giannis Antetokounmpo should take the bulk of the blame for the blown lead last night, or with your Bud joke earlier, do you think it should go elsewhere?
I would go. I think, and this is like something we've seen with, in my opinion, with the whole development with the Pelicans. Just to go off on a quick tangent, and it's that Van Gundy was sort of let go today, but I feel like a lot of the troubles they had this year were on David Griffin, and I think that there's like always a fall guy, and Giannis, of course, being the most visible and the most accomplished of any of his teammates or anyone in the organization, it's easy to look to him. And I'll never forget James Harden playing on one leg, sort of like denying the double team because he knows Giannis is going to go to the turnaround fadeaway. And I think with just sort of his acumen, he's only 26, and I think we're seeing that he's sort of learning from his mistakes and learning like the hardest way possible. But he's never been the guy for the Bucks who, is going to lead them the last 2 minutes of a game. And that's been Chris Middleton. And for Giannis, it's like, like he's going to get you 6 buckets in, transition, semi-transition. He's just going to fight for a 50-50 ball and cram it down the center's throat. And it makes me feel like it, going back to the chatter of this past offseason, and the Bucks were considered, along with Phoenix, to be one of the teams for Chris Paul. And I understand that they went for Drew, and I love Drew. I'm one of my my favorite point guards in the league. But I'm watching the game last night, and I'm just thinking, maybe they should have used those assets and that capital to pursue Chris Paul. And me feeling like, like this goes on Bud, and it's a leadership thing, because I don't know who's in Giannis's ear. I don't know who has the strength to sort of reach him, because, he was going 1 of 8 from 3 in game 2, I believe. And I don't know who's telling him not to shoot because I don't know if he's going to listen to anybody. And I feel like perhaps like he kind of needs that voice, and perhaps like Bud's voice is just sort of like, been saturated over the past 3 years. And I'm watching this game and like, I just feel like they need a voice, like more leadership. And lastly, like, just maybe fix your lineups, dude. don't start when they, Jeff Green's in the lineup and Giannis starts out on Blake Griffin and Brooke Lopez is on Jeff Green, and it's like, why? Why does that make any sense?
After the third three, you ask why, right? Like
exactly.
Even if you think it's a great idea to start at some point. So my thing here is interesting because without being in their locker room, I hesitate to necessarily go 100% on either Giannis or Bud. I certainly have more evidence that Bud can't get it done than Giannis. As you mentioned, Giannis is 26. I don't understand why the play is not always in the last 2 minutes. Giannis is the screener, Middleton off the screen, heading to the mid-range, and Giannis is rolling to an empty side of the floor, right? Like I don't understand why he's the ball handler so often, because his only move as a ball handler is go really, really fast and hard at the basket, right? Like that's not to say it's ineffective. He won 2 MVPs. It's to say that that's all he's got in the bag, right? That's all there is, and that worries me. I can't tell if that's Giannis calling off the play from the sideline or if that's Bud not calling a play from the sideline. There's several times last night that it felt like they came out of this timeout or out of something. There's one in particular that was like a timeout, stop the run, blah, 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 cut the bleeding. And then it turned into a Bryn Forbes dribble pull up from the mid-range. And it was like, what? That's what you want? Like, what did y'all just talk about? However, with that being the case, if you have your 2-time 26-year-old Greek Adonis MVP, he's got a one-legged James Harden, who is 6 inches shorter than him, on the block. You can't go turnaround fadeaway. So I go back and forth. I don't know which way to go with it.
At least throw a jump.
You face up. You face up.
Like,
face up
Christ.
Through, then that's 2 free throws. Well, maybe you don't want 2 free throws.
I think that does go through his head there.
I think that might be it. Maybe he just doesn't want to get fouled.
But the turnaround fadeaway, and I know that's like nitpicking on one play, especially when it's not like the final shot, feels so nitpicky. However, that felt like a really seminal moment. And like there's some gut punch to James Harden on one leg, the defensive prowess he is, would rather be like, hey, don't come double. If anything, that means your guy's going to back cut. I got this. And he's got it. like he wasn't lying. And so that was really big to me.
You call it defensive prowess. I call it Milwaukee bailing them out.
Oh, I was very facetiously saying defensive prowess.
I don't know why they don't go smaller also.
So I think if Bud's really gone, if they lose game 6, I think Bud is gone. And if Bud's really gone, I think the next guy's got to make Giannis a center. Like I really think he's a futuristic center, and all the things he can do, he's a tremendous passer. But I think he's a center, and I think that's part of the shtick is you want to play him and Lopez and be this giant team, but the truth is you need to play him and Bobby Portis or him and PJ Tucker and be a little bit smaller, and they just won't do it. And where's Bobby Portis been, by the way? What happened to that guy?
He's played well with the limited minutes he's had. I don't know why Bud doesn't play him more.
Anyway, I don't think he played him at all last night.
I think he got a DNP as well. Is something wrong with him?
No, what's something wrong with Bud?
There is.
And a big thing for me is it's the same thing that drove me crazy with Thibodeau in that opening series against Atlanta. Is like, why are you not singling out Trae Young? Like, why are you not singling out the guy who's playing on one leg?
Thank you.
Like why not? Just find his man and quick brush screen, isolate Drew. Like that's why you gave up your whole chest of draft picks is to get the point guard, and you don't have Eric Bledsoe anymore. You got a guy you can actually give the ball to, and like that's just been driving me crazy. And I don't know why Lopez is out there, because
he's the franchise. Do you know Brook Lopez is the franchise leader in points for Brooklyn? Because no one's been a net. Like Kenyon Martin was not a net for that long. Vince Carter was not a net for that long. And he's been there forever. And so he just has like accumulated the most points in the franchise history.
But no, the point you said there about Trae Young, this is what Philadelphia is doing. Go at him. Make him work both ends of the floor so he can't hurt you so much on the offensive end. That's what New York failed to do, but Philadelphia's taking advantage of it now.
The last thing. Sorry. Before you say, Kyle.
It's just like with Philadelphia, like they don't really have the guy to just, sort of go at Trae, because the guy who could do it, Ben Simmons, is not going to do it, not because he's not capable of doing it. And Milwaukee has the guys, like they have Middleton, they have Drew, they have the dogs that like just exploit James Harden. And yeah, I was losing my mind last night.
So this year, Milwaukee had the league leading offense, 120 points per game. They played the second fastest pace in the NBA. And Bobby Portis played 20.8 minutes per game. He averaged 20.8 minutes per game this year. He got a did not play coach's decision last night.
Who wants to bet that changes tomorrow in Game 6?
Well, I don't. Kyle's not betting against Bud. My thing is like the reason I picked them in the regular season to win the championship was they were healthy. And they did things like play Bobby Portis for 20 minutes at the right time over the course of the year. And now they're not. Like, not even not playing. Like, they're not playing 10 minutes. They're not playing. And that's just because we brought him up a second ago. I have one, and this is, I don't mean to exclude. And Jamaal, maybe you say this word as well. I got to ask Kyle, though, for, frankly, as guest the pod come through, you're only the second person I've heard use this word in basketball talk a second ago. When someone dunks one home, right, or whatever, you say cram it.
Mm-hmm.
I only heard one of the guys say that, and he was Andy from Score Zag Score, very PNW, and I'm talking about some Jalen Suggs cram from what. Is that, where'd you pick that up from, or am I out of the loop there?
Oh, just it's. I don't know if I can like regionalize it, but it's just something you hear somebody say in pickup once, and it sounds really cool, so you just kind of like adopt it into like your own language, because it is like. It is exactly what it sounds like.
You're not a PNW guy, not from the Pacific Northwest. That just came in your vocabulary at some point. You took it in.
No, I'm a Mid-Atlantic guy. I think my favorite though is I don't know if you guys have heard this one, but when you catch a mismatch in the post, and in college we would just yell mouse. And
mouse
in the house.
Yeah. You're yelling when you're crossing half court. Like, I know who's on me. You're going on your way to the block. Jamaal, obviously, you knew what he meant when he said mouse very quickly. Have you ever heard anyone say Crambo before? You're closer to the PNW than I am.
So I have heard it a couple of times. Actually, when I was in high school playing ball, you wouldn't hear it all the time, but you knew when somebody would say it. So yeah, it's not the first time.
So anyway,
the first know what it is.
Yeah, we knew what it was.
Instantaneously, when Andy said it a few weeks back on the show, I was like, that's a cool thing I've never heard said before. And it's really like descriptive. And I associate it with the PNW because he's a very, very Northwest guy. Gonzaga, Seattle, Portland, U of Oregon, like all that stuff, right? And so, like, I was like, oh, that must be their thing. And then when you said it, I was like, oh, wait, are you one of them too? Or did it make its way across and not come far enough south? Anyway, interesting. All right, last hot tea cold brew question. As we're watching the Sixers game, they just started the fourth quarter. It is 87-71 with just under 11 minutes left in the fourth. Hot tea cold brew. I'm going to throw it to Jamaal first. The winner of Philadelphia-Atlanta doesn't really stand a chance versus either Milwaukee or Brooklyn. What do you think?
Cold tea.
Cold tea?
I do expect Philadelphia to win this series because I think even though Atlanta's been a good young team, really showing a lot during these playoffs, I think Philadelphia understands, like, hey, that we are the better team. We need to show it, and I think for most of this game tonight, they're showing that. So I will say they will have trouble against no matter who they play, Milwaukee or Brooklyn. They're going to have trouble with them because on one hand, but I will say Philadelphia actually took 2 out of 3 from Brooklyn to get the 1 seed. But once again, the big three was probably not there for all 3 of those games. So that's kind of skewed a little bit. But honestly, if I'm Philly, I'd be a little bit leery about playing Milwaukee because Milwaukee won all 3 meetings this year. As a matter of fact, Philadelphia hasn't beaten them in like 3-4 years. So it's been a minute for a breakthrough win. So really, if I'm Philadelphia, like I need to wrap this series up in 6. I do not want to go to a 7th game and then you're coming in with your tongue is wagging because after what I saw last night, there's a pretty good chance that the Brooklyn Milwaukee series is going to go 7. Granted, if Bud doesn't have his head in his ass right now after what I saw last night. So it's going to be interesting to see. But I think Philadelphia will be able to match up well with both teams. But I think they will prefer Brooklyn more than Milwaukee because Milwaukee has better length.
Kyle, same question to you again. It looks like Atlanta is about to fall down 2-3 in series. And frankly, they had to fight really hard to get one of those 2 as well. But anyway, hot tea, cold brew. The winner of the Atlanta-Philadelphia series doesn't really stand a chance against the winner of the Milwaukee versus Brooklyn series.
It's crazy. Like we've done all this, like, just bashing the Bucks and Bud and Giannis, and it's just the playoffs have felt like a referendum on like how good are they really, like whether they're sweeping the Heat or they're just kind of like choking up games down the stretch, but they can still win the championship. Like they're still very much in it and they're healthy. Like that's like I know DiVincenzo's down, but like next to Phoenix, they're probably the healthiest team left. And Brooklyn, who's guarding Embiid?
No one.
Like, are you putting Blake Griffin on him? Blake gets in foul trouble. Are you just it's gonna be Claxton? Will we finally see some DeAndre Jordan? Like, I don't really know what their answer for Embiid is. And with Milwaukee, it's they got Lopez, they got Portis. They have the length, as Jamaal was saying. Like they can throw, like the Bucks defense has been solid all playoffs. Like it's just the offense that's driving everybody crazy. But they have the length. I believe that they'll throw like the correct doubles, and I think the last thing I'll say, because I'm rambling on too much, is that I would be really fascinated to see a Thybulle Durant matchup.
Oh yeah,
I think that would be really fun to watch.
Little new school, old school, Gen Z versus the millennials. No, I think that was interesting to me here is that like I watch this Philadelphia Atlanta series and it's a lot of fun. I watch Brooklyn versus Milwaukee, also a lot of fun. I do feel like both teams in Brooklyn, Milwaukee are better than both teams in Philadelphia, Atlanta. I like the competitiveness of the game is not all of it, and it's obviously both series were 2-2 heading into Game 5, and frankly, if anything, there were blowouts in the earlier part of the Brooklyn-Milwaukee series. It just felt like this group is playing better basketball than that group, and I hate to write anyone off in the playoffs, especially with how wonky health is this year. But, man, it's weird to think that as great as this Philadelphia-Atlanta series may turn out to be, it's a fight for second. Because, like, at the end of the day, Harden will only be more likely, like, now he's playing 46 minutes tonight, I guess, but he might be better in that series than he was in this one because he's barely played in the first game and then played in Game 5 of this one. If Kyrie is really just a severe sprain on his ankle, he might try and give it a go in that one. That's a different thing. We saw what Kevin Durant can do. Blake Griffin's been phenomenal. Joel is bigger than anyone they can throw at him, and he's bigger than anyone most people can throw at him. But he also has had his fair share of playoff woes, and they're better this year. They got Seth Curry. They got Thybulle. I like Maxey.
Doc Rivers play him more.
Who?
Maxey. He needs to play more.
Yeah, I like him a lot. Anyway, I look at this as like, I don't know if I pick either one of these teams over Brooklyn or Milwaukee. Joel Embiid being more than, if he's playing at 80%, I probably thought he was closer to 50%. So he's certainly playing better than I would have thought he was going to be. But Jamaal, I think you were closer to saying that Philly Atlanta winner has a chance. Are you assuming it's Philadelphia?
Yes, because let's be real. Embiid is basically taking each one of the front court players for Atlanta and taking them to the woodshed. I mean, even Capella's having his problems against him. So if that's the case, Brooklyn, maybe DeAndre Jordan, that's a big maybe. And plus, I don't even think he's even played in the playoffs yet.
He's calcified.
They're resting him entirely for this. No, y'all are missing it. He's entirely resting to come out here and guard Joel Embiid for 48 minutes a night for 7 games.
That ain't gonna happen. So with that being said, you all Blake Griffin maybe for stretches. Jeff Green, that's a mismatch. I would be almost ludicrously shocked if Kevin Durant ended up having to guard him. I know it probably won't happen, but if it's going to that, I think Philadelphia might give Brooklyn all they can handle. I think
you got to go Durant on Tobias. I guess Toby's not quite as dominant, but just from a size perspective, it's worth pointing out with 10 minutes left in the game, Joel Embiid is pretty dominant, 33 points tonight. He is plus 29 in his minutes on the floor. So in 30, almost 31 minutes of play, it looks like, based on the box score as they just hit the timeout, he is plus 29 that's a lot. Kyle, you're pointing out Milwaukee can still win this whole thing.
Very, very, very much so. It's in these fourth quarters, they've basically played as bad as they possibly could have. Like it really seems like they have like the highest floor of any of the teams remaining. And I don't think they're out of it. And I think you go around like the rest of the teams remaining. And, if you look at anything long enough, you can obviously find flaws in it. And I feel like perhaps like the Bucks are somehow like kind of like underrated. And, they'll be playing a Nets team tomorrow night who their two best players played 48 and 46 minutes, both over 30. And, I don't know if I expect the Nets to win that one. I think that might be like a wire-to-wire Bucks victory.
Well, and the truth is that as bad, and I love James Harden, he was not good on Tuesday night, right? As bad as James Harden was on Tuesday night, he played 46 minutes on a bad hammy. I don't think he's going to be better tomorrow night on the road at that. So we'll see. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's one of the things that gets better with time. But we'll see. We're going to jump into a segment called Open Container, with the idea being that once you pop the top off of the Yeti at like so, right? Anything can go in or out. That's hot, cold, liquid, ice, anything. This is really just a chance to get anything out in the open as far as your take goes. And so one popular question, especially after some LeBron James tweets today, has to do with injuries and the current playoff picture. Now, LeBron James went on a 5-tweet, I say 5, it's really closer to 3 and some change, tweet strain today, talking about how he knew all of these injuries were going to happen. And to his credit, he did talk about, he was outspoken about the season starting right before Christmas and how close that was to the bubble. And he did say, guys like me need more time off. I saw the stat today that we're at 8, and when Chris Paul misses a game, it'll be 9 All-Stars will have missed a playoff game this year. The previous record was 6. And that was in an entire postseason. We are not quite to the conference finals yet, right? And so this is a lot of injuries to key players. So the open container question, I'm going to throw it to Jamaal first, is do these NBA playoffs with so many injuries to so many stars need an asterisk?
Regrettably, yes, because for most of these teams that you saw out there, I honestly wanted to see what a healthy Denver team would have looked like this year. Because you have many of these pundits on TV asking, well, if you had Jamal Murray for most of the season with the trade of Aaron Gordon, that might have been a favorite team to come out of the West. I wanted the same thing about maybe the Bucks too with DiVincenzo. That's a bigger loss than people think. You can say the same about the Lakers. Had they been fully healthy, do we really think the Suns really hang with them? You can make the same argument for, oh man, there's just a whole lot to decipher. I hate to say it, it may have to have an asterisk by it, but that by no means takes away from what these other teams are doing, because with all the injuries that have happened, we have seen a lot of great young stars really come out and show out throughout these playoffs. We've seen Trae Young, Jason Tatum. You're looking at some of these other guys, Donovan Mitchell, Devin Booker. So even though we had the bad with the injuries, we're seeing a new group of stars really starting to make their headway now.
Kyle, same open container question to you. What's your take? Do these playoffs and their injuries deserve an asterisk?
I think we all saw this coming. I believe that when we saw like the condensed off season, we knew that there was.
What I'm hearing is LeBron is not that much smarter than the rest of us.
No, I just hated that he made it seem like nobody listened to me. Like, oh, like I was telling y'all, but like, like this is the same guy who like advocated for the bubble, like, who was hanging out with Drake and like, like faces no sort of like, COVID protocols as a result. Anyway, I believe that, just the thing I struggle with, like theoretically, is that at this point, like all the teams are kind of like going up against the same challenges of, the condensed schedule and injuries. And like, I don't feel like of the teams left, none of them were in the conference finals last year. And as a result, I feel like they're going up against the same challenges, and, luck is a part of it. And, I believe that the things that like, haven't gotten as much press as they should have. And I think that this is just kind of a result of like the flaw of NBA discourse that we all talk about, like what we hate about the NBA, rather than like, like just sort of the joys and the love of it, is just the emergence of stars. And also that, like, if you look at the teams remaining in, Philadelphia, Atlanta, Utah, Phoenix, et cetera, I think the last team to win a championship of the group is the Sixers in 83. And, the Nets have never won a championship. The Suns have never won a championship. And I just, everybody complains that like, it's the same teams every year. Well, it's not anymore.
Not this year.
And I wish that was just sort of celebrated a little more, because it seems like, like now that LeBron's not in it and Curry's not in it, like everybody's like, oh, I'm not watching that. But it's like you're the same people who are complaining that like, you watch the same folks every year. So
the small town stars leave to go join super teams in LA and Miami. It's like, well, now that it's not LA and Miami, you're done watching. Like, what do you expect them to do?
Mm-hmm. It's just, I'm just totally convinced that like, there's just so many people out there who would just find something to be upset about. And it doesn't matter how good everything is, like somebody's going to find a way to be miserable. So I feel like that's the shame, along with the injuries. And I don't think we're seeing the best basketball we probably could, but I think basketball has been pretty good. Maybe that's just me. I've been happy.
I mean, obviously, we just talked about how great Kevin Durant was last night. I think the basketball's been really good. I think that the interesting thing when you start looking at asterisks is like, I am notoriously anti-asterisk. My co-host, or my former co-host on my other show, Shaka, he and I had a whole debate back on, I'm a Houston guy. The Astros got in trouble, right, for their cheating stuff. And he was like, asterisk. I was like, everyone in baseball, this isn't a baseball show, but I thought back to this article I read, it was really based around the bubble. And so when the bubble came out, there were a lot of people, or when the bubble was going to happen and the Lakers won, and it was clearly like teams were shooting differently than they had before. You had Tyler Hero got 39 points in a very important game, right? You had guys like the Anthony Davis was hitting mid-range pull-ups like he was Chris Paul. Like there was something different going on, right? And people are saying we need to asterisk the bubble. And the most funny thing I read last fall when that was all happening was by Tom Haberstroh. I had to look up. I didn't remember it being with NBC Sports. I just didn't associate with him. I didn't associate him with them, but it was with NBC Sports. And Tom Haberstroh said, that's fair. We need to put an asterisk on the 2020 bubble, and we need to go through and put it in correct historical context with every other championship that has an asterisk. And he goes back to 2019 with the Toronto Raptors, who played Kevin Durant and Klay Thompson, both injured, right? The 2018 champions, the Warriors got to play in the NBA Finals after playing a Rockets team after Chris Paul got hurt in the finals there. He also brings up that LeBron James broke his hand. Again, that's the did or did he not. The 2017 asterisk, he made sure to point out that Kawhi Leonard lands on Zaza Pachulia's foot, hurts his quad, gets up a 23-point lead, and that was a whole different deal there. 2016, Draymond Green suspension, right? We talked about the 3-1 lead the Warriors broke, but like that also was a Draymond Green suspension. 2015, he brings up Kevin Love, Kyrie Irving. He literally goes back. He has the malfunctioned air conditioner in Game 1 of the 2014 Finals. 2013, he talks about breaking up the trio in Oklahoma City. He goes all the way back. He does it to every single NBA Finals, all the way back. If I scroll all the way back to the bottom of the night, including the 1950. He does every single NBA Finals and gives some 3 or 4 sentence reason about like why that one was weird. And in the inaugural season of the NBA, there were 17 teams, 6 of which were contracted by year 2. Rebounds were introduced as an official stat the next year. And new rule, if we're not even counting rebounds yet, why are we counting this as a title? Like there's so many like factors. If you look back every year, and the crux of his article is every year could have its own asterisk. This one is unfortunately at the detriment of the health of the players. And I think that like hurts in a different way than like they played in a bubble or like LeBron James caught cramps or they had a lockout season, so they played less games. Like those things all feel different than seeing
I think the last 2 shortened seasons, 1999, where you had the Knicks, the 8th seed against the Spurs, they win a championship in Duncan's second season. And I can just imagine like just NBA Twitter just like furious about it. Like, oh, I don't want to watch San Antonio. Are you serious? I don't want to watch the Knicks without Patrick Ewing. It was the start of something. And, we're not going to know for years and years, but like, what if this is kind of like the first domino that falls? And, I'm not sure what that domino is. I'm not that clairvoyant, but I just feel like, it's as much about like sort of like the immediate as it is about like the distant future. And what kind of changes could we see erupt from whatever the results of these playoffs are? You know what I mean?
So you said 99. I scrolled down, and lockout season is why Haberstroh asterisk 99. But right below that 98, the funniest one I've seen in a while is asterisk reason MJ pushed off. That's the whole. That's the whole.
He needs to go away from that.
I think it's interesting. Like Jamaal, do you not feel like you could go through an asterisk a lot of seasons if you gave this one, or does the injury bug make it different than things like a lockout?
It does make it different. The last 2 seasons, it could be a lot different. I mean, come on. Did any of us expect the season last year to basically come to a halt after the pandemic really got through basically into the entire world? None of us saw that coming. Like, and I'll be the first to admit, when I first heard about it, I was like, oh, it's nothing. It's silly or whatnot. Then when you saw it coming all over, I was like, uh-oh, now we got a problem. So there's that factor, the injury bugs that just crushed everything I loved about the season, because I felt like there were a lot of good teams out there who I said, wow, if they stay healthy and if they continue to do what they're doing, that, hey, they'll be all right. And yes, I will be a homer. I honestly would not care anymore. When Murray went down, I said, yep, there goes our title season right there. I was like, killer.
That's Homer, Jamaal, Simmons talking about the Denver Nuggets falling down. I guess I kind of had the same feeling when the Rockets traded Harden, although that felt self-inflicted. As we're going to move into another segment, kind of shifting to the other news of the day here. We talked about Chris Paul and Kawhi Leonard being literally, frankly, before people on the West Coast were probably awake, right? It was like 8 o'clock in Texas, 9 o'clock on the East Coast. That's pretty early out West. The bigger news over the course of the rest of the day was a handful of coaches, some of whom have not been coaching that long, getting fired or getting mutually parting ways, which I think is interesting, which coaches get fired and which coaches get told that we're going to mutually part ways.
Right.
Bud's going to get fired.
What you say?
Bud's going to be fired.
Bud's going to be fired. Well, Bud would be counter to the trend I'm noticing, but that's not here or there. The segment's called The Long Two, and it's basically look at, a long two is a mid-range jump shot. Some people think it's silly. Some people hate it, like analytics nerds. That's like Daryl Morey hates the mid-range jump shot, the long two, because if you take a big step backwards, you get a whole other point. Why are you taking this shot? But it's our shot. This is the midweek mid-range. And so I ask you, let's start with Kyle, the best two coaching openings in the NBA. As you sit here today, Milwaukee is not an option yet. As you sit here today, the best two coaching openings you see are what, Kyle?
I think it's so easy to talk myself out of each stop. Like, I could say Portland because they have 2 stars, but, what's really the ceiling there? And, Orlando, it's a long-term rebuilding project. And Washington and Boston, it's like you got 2 stars, but, what else is really there? And if I had to pick 2, I think I would go Pelicans. And I think my other pick would just have to be the Boston Celtics because Jason Tatum's probably, next behind Damian Lillard is the best player available best available to coach among all these vacancies.
And I'm going to throw it to Jamaal, and here's 2 answers for you to talk about all these openings. I will point out before I jump there, though, that Atlanta has cut it to 6 with 3 minutes and 20 seconds to go. For Trae Young, that's 2 shots, right? So we'll see what happens there if you're watching at home. Jamaal, long 2. Give me your 2. The best 2 coaching openings in the NBA as we sit here are blank and blank.
So I will say what Kyle, he already mentioned it. Boston, I think, is probably going to be one of the more attractive vacancies that we have. I'll give you a sleeper team. I say the Indiana Pacer job might be a little bit interesting because here's the deal. Indiana has been inconsistent throughout most of the season, but then people forget Chris LeVert was gone with that tumor, I believe, and he was out for a good while. Thank goodness he came back. I think if it wasn't for that Houston trade, I don't think they even would have found that. So thank goodness for that. And then their star center, Miles Turner, was gone for basically most of the season. So bring those 2 guys back, along with Sabonis and whatnot, you may have a solid team there, more than people think.
So the list of teams that currently don't have a head coach are Boston, Indiana, New Orleans, Orlando, Portland, and Washington. I like Sabonis. My worry with Indiana is I don't know if Sabonis or LeVert are the kind of star. If I have my choice, obviously, if any one of these teams wants to call me, I can DM me. I'll send you my phone number. We can talk. I promise I'll take half of whatever you're paying the other guy. But if one of these teams were to, I had multiple of these teams, I'd probably want someone of a little bit higher star caliber. I think if Sabonis is your second best player, you're really good. If he's your best player offensively, I don't know. Miles Turner, I want him on my team. Can he be my second best player? I look at Boston and New Orleans as well. I look at them both as young teams, whereas Portland is not a young team. And then conversely, Orlando is a young team, but that's about all they got going for them, right? Although, don't sleep on my man, RJ Hampton. I like that guy. So I look at this as teams with young stars like New Orleans and Boston, somewhat except for Boston. These are a lot of mid-sized to small markets. Let's talk. Can we talk a little bit about like how do we get to this place? We have 6 coaches fired. We potentially have 1 or 2 more coming. What's going on here, Kyle? What are you seeing?
I think it's sort of like you have to look at it like case by case rather than just the amalgamation of it. And with what I find most interesting about this, because like the Brooks situation, like his contract expired, and the Stevens situation, he wanted to pivot to the front office, so he actually stayed within the organization. So I don't know if you can look at those two so much, but I think you have to look at the 2 teams this year who fired coaches who are in their first year of their contracts. And, Nate Bjork and there was that just crazy fallout and drama and just sort of like the cultural toxicity that was going on in Indiana. And, with Stan, it kind of seemed like, perhaps he was able to achieve this growth with Zion and Lonzo and Josh Hart, but it just maybe seemed like he's kind of stuck in another era. But what are the failures from those 2 coaches that these teams can take so they don't make this mistake again? And what I think is probably the greatest travesty of anything that happened is that Zion's about to have his 3rd coach in 3 seasons.
Right?
That is such a disservice to the kind of talent he is, and who knows how long his peak is. And I just who's that coach going to be? And I hope that we see a little more diverse coaching searches take place. And I'd love to see Chauncey Billups and Parker, we were talking this a couple weeks ago, just the kind of first year coaches that we might see, and I find that to be exciting.
Jamaal, are you noticing something weird in these coaching mix-ups, or are these teams all kind of they just all coincidentally hit this point at the same time?
So I look at it as really what kind of coach and culture do you want to set, and then you got to look at your roster as well. So honestly, I saw Stan Van Gundy being fired after 1 season because I clearly saw that he just could not relate to his players at any point. And the same thing happened in Indiana, although that was a much more volatile situation. So I think it's really going to have to come down to, can you get the right coach for the roster you have? If you have a young roster, you want to have a coach that's going to really apply more to their strengths and to more for what they see throughout on the court. So, but with a more veteran team, you can get away with having an older coach because those 2 will mend together because they've seen things throughout the league separately. So that's the main thing I see for all these coaching vacancies.
What do y'all think about this? At what point is this just GMs trying to make it look like it wasn't their fault, right? If you're Boston and Danny Ainge didn't have the cojones to do what Masai Ujiri did, right? Masai Ujiri said, this isn't working. We're trading 1 superstar for Kawhi Leonard because that makes us good enough, even if it's just for 1 year. And there were some breaks along the way, but they did win the championship that year. Boston, unless you don't think the reports are true, did not go swap Jaylen Brown for Anthony Davis in the last month of his contract because they didn't want to make that move. They thought Jaylen Brown was enough. They did a lot of accumulating picks in Kemba Walker. Hadn't worked out so well, right? You look at New Orleans. David Griffin goes out and gets Stan Van Gundy. They go to point Zion. It looks great. But they also have the lane clogged up with Steven Adams, who's kind of a dinosaur. I mean, Steven Adams is a good guy, but does that really mesh very well? Orlando. Yeah, the coach is, also a giant pile of trash. But, if you look at what Orlando's got, look at that roster. What are they really doing? Portland, I've always thought that their roster is weird with 2 small guards and no defensive center. That just doesn't seem to mesh well with me. Washington, whether it's, obviously you didn't offer John Wall the contract knowing he'd get hurt all that much, but that seems to be catapulting this franchise into the place that it is. It seems like each of these to me has some GM problem as well, right, Kyle?
Yes, absolutely. And John, I think it was John Hollinger or Daniel LaRue. They were saying that, general managers get one. Like they get one card to pull where they scapegoat the coach. And I'll take the Washington Wizards for example, because team I hold very near and dear to my heart, and I follow very closely. And you saw Shepherd have some successes this year on the margins. Like he signed Raul Neto and Robin Lopez, and they were both rotation pieces for a playoff team. And John Wall traded for Russell Westbrook. They got the better player out of the deal. Sorry, Parker. And
it's okay. I will say I thoroughly enjoyed John Wall this year.
He looked better than I thought he would be.
I wish he played more. That's where I'll leave it at
I feel you there.
But keep going.
And I think that with Tommy Shepherd, you have to kind of look at like the poison pills on the roster. And for instance, that's Davis Bertans. And, they give him the 5-year, $80 million contract. And, whether he's like, one of the best at his role in the NBA or not, you're seeing him pull up like, quintuple zero stat lines. And the whole Brooks thing, I think maybe the most miraculous part about it wasn't that he lasted 5 years, but when he was hired in 2016, it was a 5-year, $35 million contract, because that was just the market for coaches back then. And I mean, Scott Brooks was making $7 million a year, which is, Luka Doncic money this past season. So I'm going to need to see results before I can feel at ease about anything with that organization. And I'm sure the other fan bases feel the same way. I'm not going into it with a lot of hope, but I think they made the right decision.
Thing about Scott Brooks is he got to coach his boy Russell Westbrook again. How in the three-ring circus that is the NBA, how did that happen? Jamaal, is this all bad coaching, or is there also something else in the works here? And then I also want to ask you about Denver. Mike Malone is a good coach. Denver caught some bad breaks this year. But there's like a weird thing that at some point you make a change just to get a new voice in the room, and they've had the same voice in the room in Denver for a long time. As a Denver guy, are you okay with Mike Malone? Do you want to change? Do you want one of these guys that's now on the market? Or
So I'll answer the first question. So I think it's more of a GM problem that we have in the league right now. I don't think it's just purely bad coaching, because we've seen bad coaching. There's no argument. But I think the GM has a responsibility to make sure to put out a winning product. I think that's the main thing there. Now, as far as Mike Malone,
pause. I want to just because you're between thoughts. The Atlanta Hawks are up by 1 point with 1:13 to go.
If Philadelphia blows this game.
All right. You're going to talk about Mike Malone, Jamaal. I just want while you had a second between thoughts, I had to throw that in there.
Ooh, I'm sorry. It looked like Philadelphia is trying to blow this game. But anyway, most of the Denver population here, they love Mike Malone, because before him, we've had a bad string of coaching. Like, I think most of us remember George Karl, his departure after the 2013 season. You get a 3 seed, and then that was basically the birth of Steph Curry. So I was like, yeesh, here we go again with that guy. And then we had Brian Shaw for a couple of years. That didn't go well. And so now they actually have a coach who's actually brought back a winning culture and whatnot. And Jokic said it before. This is his guy. This is his coach or whatever. So, and I think that'll play a major decision down the road if he decides to sign that Supermax contract, which he's available for after winning the MVP. So it's going to be very interesting to see how that goes. But as far as them needing a new voice, I don't think that's the case, because as you said, well, as we've all been saying, they've got hit with the injury bug at the wrong time, because it wasn't just Murray. Monte Morris missed a good portion of the season. We lost Barton at the tail end of the season going into the playoffs. He just came back in the Phoenix series. I'm actually surprised he actually played pretty well. We lost PJ Dozier, which I think was a bigger loss than people think, because he adds defensive presence.
Yeah, no.
I'm a PJ Dozier fan.
Yes, I think he would have given Booker a lot more trouble than he had. So I will really want to see next year because, of course, I don't know if Gordon's going to stay there or not. And, of course, MPJ is going to be eligible for an extension pretty soon. I think if not this year, then next year, if I'm not mistaken. It's going to be interesting to see what they do there. I want to see what a healthy Nuggets team will look like next year. And that's probably not going to be until maybe February or March at the most, depends on how Murray's rehab goes. So it's going to be a very interesting offseason or two in Denver.
So,
I have a question.
What were you going to say? What were we going to ask, Kyle? First of all, I want to point out it is a 3-point game. Atlanta's up by 3, 21.9 seconds. Philly just called timeout coming out of the timeout. And if you're Doc Rivers, do you put Ben Simmons in the game? And does Atlanta go to hack a Simmons if he is?
Inbounds the ball.
he throws the ball in.
Yeah, inbound the ball.
He's your inbounder. So my question, Jamaal, was all I see of Mike Malone is when the Nuggets have a bad loss and he's kind of like calling out guys in the press conference, and he kind of strikes me as the type of guy where because he does single guys out and he does call out his team, that seems like the kind of voice that would kind of like lose its effect over time. Just guys getting kind of sick of like, well, maybe our game plan wasn't that good. Like just kind of getting in like that mindset. So I think this is a big year for Mike Malone coming up, regardless of the team's health.
I will say that you talk about the toughness of Malone, but if Jokic likes it, everyone else got to get on board, right? Like if the star can take that type of a guy, right? I think you got to roll with it. The same way that LeBron has so much say in his coach, the same way that Steph Curry and Steve Kerr get along. Like if it meshes there, you got to fill in the rest of it around it because Jokic is, there's one Nikola Jokic. The Joker's on his own. I do think you're right though, Kyle, that there are probably a lot of guys in the NBA that don't jive with him, right? Like. He's a little too old school for a lot of guys. They sent
and just the whole Cassidy Hubbard thing was very strange to me.
He
insisted on being called Michael. I didn't like that at all. It just kind of seems like a jerk.
I will say he did apologize afterward for it, so he probably will get a pass. But agreed, that just came out of left field.
They sent the Hawks fouled Joel Embiid. On a drive to the basket with 10.2 seconds to go. Still 3-point game. They called timeout. Anyway, I want to ask, because we talked with Jamaal about if his Denver Nuggets are going to potentially move on from the coaching time in the near future. And I am kind of stalling to see what happens in this game while we're on the air. But Kyle, who do you want to come in for the Wizards? Do you have a favorite?
I think that the thing they have to prioritize is somebody who will inspire Bradley Beal, because that's the guy you want to keep, and who are realistically the only people who can reach Russell Westbrook. And, he got along with Brooks so well because he was enabling Westbrook, and, he would let him just kind of go reckless and, pedal to the floor just the way Westbrook wants to play. Like the guy who comes in can't be a Nate Bjorken who just wants to kind of like institute his culture, and you kind of got to meet these two guys in the middle. So I think it has to be,
That was the report on Westbrook in Houston was he and Morey and D'Antoni. That was not a good combination. And I think at the end of it, it was kind of the ball's not in my hands enough. And I don't mean that to be a negative, but it didn't work. And so he's like, well, if this didn't work, why am I not getting the ball more? But I do think there's something to say there that you have to blend mixing with both appeasing to Brad Beal so you don't lose him between now when his contract expires in summer of 23, which is realistic. Like if you think you're not going to re-sign him, you might trade him between now and then to get some value back. And also appeal to Russell Westbrook because you got a lot invested in him too.
Yeah, I think the perfect candidate would be Chauncey Billups. Because
that'd be interesting.
Because it's a guy I loved his demeanor on the court. Like he was.
Sorry, I have the sound off clearly. That was a foul on the Sixers. it's now Atlanta's ball. So the foul I thought was on Joel Embiid must have actually been called on Joel Embiid because Atlanta's got the ball. And anyway, they're going to blow this game. Back to you, Kyle.
They're going to blow this game.
Rob Perez said the worst choke job I've seen since yesterday.
That's pretty good. All right, keep going, Kyle. Sorry, I was taken aback.
No worries. I just Chauncey's whole demeanor as a player was like just cerebral and, you know, just total, like, just to use a cliche, like Chris Paul is a point guard. Chauncey was like the floor general. Like, he was in charge of everything. And just a guy who, again, will be able to reach Westbrook, guy who played against Westbrook. I think that's an important thing here, you know, like an OG from his days.
Yeah, completely. I think there's something to Westbrook looks up to that, like, tougher generation. Because, like, he's got a chip on his shoulder. He's a tough guy. But you think that also would gel with Beal pretty well?
I think it would, because Brad's whole personality is very much like, you know, like this is it. It's not the Westbrook chip on his shoulder. It's more like a, you know, I'm gonna do it. He has a lot. He's a very prideful individual.
Wow.
Yeah. I'm a little distracted.
Yeah, we're all watching the game here. Sorry for the folks at home. Philly misses a 3. I'm behind you guys, I guess. They lost that. Oh, hit a 2.
Yeah. They blew that game. They blew it.
Jamaal, kind of in the same vein, obviously, you don't think it's time to move on from Mike Malone yet, and I don't necessarily want my Rockets to move on from Steven Silas so he has an actual NBA roster to work with. But is there – you seem to like ooh and ah when Kyle brought up Chauncey Billups. Is there a candidate or two you think is really above the rest in the NBA right now?
I wouldn't say above the rest, but I think should definitely get more consideration. As Kyle said, Chauncey Billups. I would look at Sam Cassell as well. There are a lot of guys out there who would definitely should be more considered for these jobs. I think those are the first two that come to mind for me. I also think about maybe Alvin Gentry. I still think that he got a raw deal up there in no, I don't think it was Memphis, but some other team I can't remember. But I think he should get more consideration. There are guys out there, but it's hard to find the right coach to mess with whatever roster you have. It's not easy.
Yeah, I think that it's interesting because we're probably about to see a move into less former head coaches, more former assistant coaches, whether that's, you know, there was rumor around the, you know, Stan Van Gundy firing about if Teresa Weatherspoon is going to get moved up there. In the same light of having a female head coach, you know, Becky Hammon will get a job someday on the Spurs bench. You also look at, like, I thoroughly enjoyed having Steven Silas as the Rockets coach, even though we weren't very good this season, and he was a great offensive assistant under Carlisle. Do you go the same vein and get Billups off of Lou's bench, or do you get Vanderpool, who's currently on the Minnesota bench, right? He had been on the Portland bench previously. I don't know where you go with that, but I hope to see some new faces turn over. We're going long, so I want to ask you guys quickly, anything you guys writing or reading? It's time for some Wednesday night writes. Jamaal, anything you've been writing or reading lately?
Well, it hasn't really been much. It's really just focusing on really what the whole playoffs have been and done. Because I'm more of the guy who likes to actually watch what happens besides reading. That's just me. Well,
and I also want to point out, because I almost always know where Kyle's going here. Have you been, like, listening to any other podcast out there as far as basketball? Because Kyle always has a lot to listen to. Jamaal, you got anything you're listening to?
No. So at the moment, no. But I was a guest on another podcast. I think he was last week. Just on another guest, but it's just really just getting in tune to really what all the news is happening as far as all the big coaching changes, and really just seeing who's going to be able to withstand all this pressure come the stretch run of the playoffs.
Kyle, talk to me. The theme of this segment is what you're writing or reading, but you're also always listening to stuff. So what are you taking in or putting out these days?
So my job, I do a lot of stuff with spreadsheets, which is why I have a lot of time to listen to podcasts.
Fair enough.
I was just thrilled. I was thrilled to I listened to Low Post. See that last week you had Bobby Marks and Seth Partnow on, and I've been up on Seth Partnow's stuff for a while. Just one of the best analytical minds, up there with Haberstroh. Just making it easy to digest these very just between the ears kind of numbers. So that was cool. I had a take also. This shouldn't jumpstart a conversation, but it could, about the all defensive team selections. I did not like that Thibault was on it, and it has nothing to do with his ability. I just feel a certain way about putting 20-minute off the bench guys into one of the two all defensive teams, and that's only 10 guys. And I feel like this didn't get enough press, but I felt like Mikal Bridges was slighted, and it should have been him instead.
I think the thing that strikes me there, and we can go down that road if you want. My thing that I thought was interesting is that Mikal Bridges kind of needed to be on there for me, as someone's got to represent the Suns. They were very good, right? The Suns were not just
on the Lakers.
What's up?
Or Caruso on the Lakers, number 1D, no representatives.
Right. And I was thinking more holistically, this is a good team, and it's not like they're just outscoring people. And he would have been my first nominee from them. Although you could argue in the playoffs, Ayton would have a fight for that spot too. I also think it's interesting that Miami had two guys on there, and I don't think I think that was more reputation. I think, frankly, it felt like we're still using the bubble as a metric there, because as good as Butler and Adebayo were then, they were not necessarily this year. Anyway, I think Thibault's got a lot of career left, obviously, with a lot of time on the deal. But Jamaal, do you have any all defensive thoughts?
So I think Clint Capella was definitely slighted. You will get a vote from me from Mikal Bridges for what he's done. I think he should have got more love as well.
And then I think it's interesting that obviously Rudy Gobert makes it, Bam Adebayo makes it, because I just mentioned him. Joel Embiid came in second all defense and second in MVP and second all NBA. Just the silver medalist of the year. It's just no fun. My Wednesday night rights bit. Were you do you have more besides the low post?
No, that's it. That's all I got.
Obviously, I would always read Roaming the Baseline by Nikias. I was reading up on, trying to see if I could find anything on science and medical stuff. I didn't find a whole lot, although I did come across that Haberstroh thing I mentioned earlier with the asterisks. As far as writing goes, I was at my home in Austin for a little while visiting my family, so I missed a little bit of that. I did get a thing out on the craziness of today. I called today the Red Wednesday of the NBA from the Red Wedding. But it was really just a summary of all this chaos is happening at this time where a lot of the NBA is changing. I'm trying to get something out on Luka Doncic in the next day or two, because I do think where there's smoke, there's fire there. I'd be remiss, though, if as a history teacher, I'm also on the side reading this book called On Juneteenth by Annette Gordon-Reed. And I guess my deal there is that I am learning now. So Juneteenth I'm a Texan. Juneteenth has always been a big deal in Texas. It's interesting. I thought it was a very Texan holiday because Juneteenth is the day that, formerly enslaved African Americans in 1865 realized that, we were supposed to have been freed a while back, and no one told us, because the Union troops sailed into Galveston and said, hey, y'all need to follow the laws. The laws of the land are here now. I thought that was a big deal in Texas, and I've always thought that's frankly, there's this weird besmirch on Texas because we didn't follow the law until the law showed up and told us to follow the law. But I didn't realize it was kind of turning into a national day. It was just passed as a federal holiday. And I'm reading that book as a history teacher, frankly, because I'm just reading history stuff in the summer. It's just interesting to me to see this day become a national thing. As a white guy in Texas, I knew it was a Texas thing. I didn't realize it was a national thing. But anyway, that's what I got. We're going to move into Buzzer Beater. Do either one of you all have a take to get off in 20, 4 seconds.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, Carol goes first.
Okay.
Kyle's pointing at Jamaal. I can't tell if that's because he's thinking up one or if he just wants to hear the Jamaal energy. Because Jamaal does have really good energy for these. And frankly, if memory serves me correctly, Jamaal, you're always very well timed. So if you're ready to go, I'm going to count you down. You ready?
Ready.
3, 2, 1, go.
So after Kevin Durant's historic performance last night, it brought me back to memories of Charles Barkley when he put up monster numbers like that. Game 5 in 1993 Western Conference Finals against Seattle, 43 points, 15 rebounds, and 10 assists. These guys are only like 2 of 5 people who ever put up triple-double numbers like that. So Kevin Durant really put himself in great company with that game last night.
Shout out to Chuck. Chuck hates numbers, but every time you look at his numbers, he's always in this vein.
Put respect on that man's name.
Okay. Kyle, did you think of something?
Yeah, I apologize. I was like the guy at the restaurant who's like, get to me last. Like, 'cause I'm still looking at the menu. Looking at this menu of takes I have to choose
Menu
from.
of takes.
But
That's his own show, Menu of Takes. All right, if you're ready, I'm going to count you down. In 3, 2, 1, go.
Once again, to rag on NBA Twitter discourse, I hate, and maybe like I'm just missing the joke. Maybe it's just, kind of facetious or sarcastic. But after game 3 and 4 of the Nets Bucks series, and everyone's like, oh, is Durant really your number one option? Yeah.
Yeah. I was worried you're gonna run out of time, and then I was like, "Oh no, this is on purpose." Yeah, it's the punchline.
Deliver with my speed, like Kyle Anderson.
Can you believe that was things people were saying after PJ Tucker? PJ Tucker played him well on Sunday, but that was he can't do this.
How people forget.
It's always interesting to see how they call Tuck, but it didn't matter
for 3 years. Yeah, I get it a lot.
He's my first team all fire hydrant, which is the guys are just like it's not like Zion strength or like Dwight Howard strength. It's like just grown man strength. Like you got Ingles there, Bogdanovich, PJ Tucker. Still fleshing out the names, but it's definitely named after Carl Landry. Carl Landry All-Stars.
I forgot about that name.
The Carl Landry All-Stars.
Remember Anthony Mason? I'm not sure.
Carl Landry throwback to the odds. I guess Anthony Mason's even further. All right, I got mine. We almost touched on it earlier, so this is actually kind of fresh. But 3, 2, 1. All right, so we mentioned earlier LeBron James went on a tweet storm today about he was right and all these guys got hurt and da-da-da-da-da. And this brings up something that continues to happen with LeBron James, who I actually do like. However, injury news today ain't about you. You don't have to center the conversation on I was right when we were all, as Kyle pointed out, saying the exact same thing in December when the season is going to happen. That's my time. Anyway, I just felt like – oh, there it goes. I got a text at the same time, so I went off late. I felt like that was a weird thing. Why did that have to be centered on him today when other guys were hurt? All right, let's wrap this up. We're way over. I mean, if not that there's a time constraint, but we went on for a long time talking about hoops. A lot of hoops to talk about tonight, including we got to witness live Atlanta come back in a Philly collapse. Jamaal, tell people where they can find you.
So Twitter handle here's on the screen. I'm also on Facebook and Instagram as well. It's going to be mostly on Twitter where you're going to find most of my podcast stuff on as well as articles as well.
And Kyle, where can people find you at?
At Kyle Edwards with an O.
And explain to the people, is Edwards with an O a play on words, or is that how you spell your name?
No, it's the Edwards with an A was already taken. So I don't believe in. Sorry, Parker. I don't believe in putting digits at the end of your handles.
Oh, that's funny.
Something I'm against.
That's
Oh,
funny.
wow, why don't you?
Well, I got to hear that take at some other point. The truth is that's so I was born in Houston. We moved to Austin as elementary school. 512 is the Austin area code. And so there's more than one Painsworth out there apparently, so that's which one. But Painsworth 512 is where you can find me on Twitter and Instagram. That's PAINSWORTH 512, all one word. I also write some for Belly Up. Obviously, like I said, I was at home last week, but I'm back to writing. I'm hoping to get up more stuff this week, including that Luka Doncic thing. You can find out stuff at bellyupsports.com. My audio show is Effin' Sports, a show where teachers grade sports topics and things. That comes out every Monday. This week was a Tuesday, but it comes at the beginning of each week. And this show is the Midweek Midrange. You can find us on YouTube if you just look up the Midweek Midrange. You find us on Twitter and Instagram at Midweek Midrange. That's where you can find all our content, videos, tweets, clips, whatever. But that's all we've got for you today. It has been a long show, but a good show, talking lots of NBA playoff stuff. So with that said, it's time to sign off, but we want to make sure we say thank y'all for pulling up. Take care, guys.
Thanks, guys.